How do you deal with disrespectful statements?
Older men, they can be quite misogynistic. Some feel like they have the upper hand. However, that I don't think this is the case with younger men. I feel like
it is not often that we're sitting beside an ex-Miss Universe Singapore, and today we have Miss Lisa Marie White sitting beside us. Now, we're going to ask her some tough questions. So, Lisa, how was your Miss Universe Singapore experience like?
Well, my experience at the pageant was very eye-opening for me and very interesting. I always thought before I joined the competition that joining something like that would be very competitive, and that would be, you hear stories or you hear rumors about
Bitchy
environments.
women.
Yes,
Yeah.
environments like that being very catty and very uncomfortable. But to my surprise, it was actually it was one of the nicest environments I've been in, and everybody there was so supportive, and there was like a camaraderie that we had together, and we garnered from that experience, and till now a lot of us are still friends.
Nice.
Good friends. 10 years on, it's been 10 years.
Actually help certain artists and singers or performers with the review of their contracts.
Interesting that you mentioned representing artists. Like, what were some of the difficulties that you noticed the artists having representing them?
I think the first thing is they don't even perhaps read the contract.
Right.
Because they're so excited that this big media company wants to sign them up. It's a huge deal for them. Oftentimes they're kind of like young, or and they feel like, hey, there's no point negotiating because there's nothing that they can change. But then sometimes there are very punitive clauses in these contracts. For example, change your hair color. If you get a boyfriend, you need to let us know, and we need to prove it. But on the more aggressive end, it goes like to things like, we are going to control all of your social media accounts. Right? And then they feel very stuck because, you know, they feel like the agent has too much control over them. And I think all these things aside can still be managed, but the one that is the most punitive for young artists coming up is the lock-in. So there are different lock-ins. Typically what I see is that if you're a less sort of like up-and-coming talent, they will lock you in for a shorter time. But if they think that, hey, you have a lot of talent, a lot of skills, I see these lock-ins grow to like 6 years, 10 years. And if you don't go past that certain sort of like milestone by a certain age, your probability of success really drops. So then they come and say like, hey, can we get out of the contract, or what does this contract say? And then when it comes to music production, there'll be things like who owns the rights to your music. One of the famous stories is with Taylor Swift, right? Where she sang the songs, wrote the songs, and then she went to re-sing them because she was like, I want to just recreate and reproduce things that I can say is my own.
I think I can imagine also that somebody who's new to the industry and somebody who's, oh my God, I have this contract from this person, I'm going to accept it. And they probably think that they don't have much room for negotiation, right? Do they normally have room for negotiation in contracts like this, or no?
Actually, surprisingly, they actually do. So when some of them bring their contracts to me, they sort of like get surprised when they understand the layman terms of a particular clause.
Yeah.
And they actually do get sort of like a compromise position. So I would say like it is useful to just understand what you're signing yourself up to. But did you have to sign like a contract when you became Miss Universe Singapore?
Yes, I did have to sign a contract.
Did you know what you're signing?
Yes, I did know what I was signing. But I think that the contract and the role of the organization was just to bring me to the competition and bring me back safely.
Oh.
But I thought that the contract that I was signing meant that they would manage me and they would take care of my career.
It didn't say that.
The engagements that I had during that period were under that.
How do you think law can play a role for that?
I think law can help entertainers and creative artists have better contracts in place that protect their rights. What I found with my experience was when I was doing modeling and acting, a lot of the contracts would promise that they would pay you within a certain period. Like 90 days, for example, but they won't end up paying you until 6 months later. And you would have to constantly chase them.
It's actually a really good point. Let's not talk about maybe artists. Let's talk about, like, I believe tennis players, competitive tennis players don't actually get paid a base salary. And the ones that we know are the very famous ones who get paid millions of dollars, but the ones below them actually struggled for quite some time until one of the tennis players who made it campaigned for a base salary. I mean, applying it in the entertainment space, I think I do see contracts which I was quite surprised by, that where the money flow goes to the manager or the agency first, and then it will trickle down to the artists on a quarterly basis. The second structure that I see is the managers taking the money first. But for some reason, in a lot of the artist contracts, it's after the event, then a particular period of time, then they pay the manager, and the manager then pays you when they kind of feel like it. So I think having that protection there is kind of useful. How do you deal with, like, disrespectful statements? And there was once this client told me, you're like a prostitute. You only get on calls when you get paid. Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
There were other people on the call.
What?
And
did anybody stand up for you?
No, nobody. They were just a bit shocked. But in my opinion, I hear that a lot. So I'm kind of like a little bit sort of like just brushing it aside.
Yeah.
But is that something that, do you get sort of like these sort of comments at your workplace in the past?
I think, like, my thoughts, it could be a little bit controversial, but my personal opinion is that with some of the older men, they can be quite misogynistic sometimes. It's like men feel like they have the upper hand. Not actually, I have to say, however, that I don't think this is the case with younger men. I feel like with younger men, they're becoming a bit more
worldly.
Yeah, worldly, but they're more respectful of women.
Yeah.
And they treat women respectfully. But I find that, for some reasons, like in work meetings sometimes, when I'm in an environment with them, sometimes somehow the conversation, even in the corporate setting, goes towards women. And then they would discuss about women from countries like Thailand,
like
or
objectifying
Vietnam.
women.
And objectifying women. And I don't really see the relation to it. And sometimes in my previous role, I was a yacht broker, and I met clients that would say some really
interesting
weird
statements.
Yeah, really like disrespectful things. But I think that, like, it happens so much that we've, as women here, we just sort of like let it. Yeah, we brush it over, and I don't think we should anymore. I think that we should. If somebody says things that are disrespectful to us, even in corporate environments, and even in an environment where the gentleman was my boss or my team lead, like I wouldn't be afraid to stand up to them, because I don't think that anybody should be speaking to women in that way in this day and age.
The market is changing because the media scene is different. It's less TV based now. It's a lot of Instagram, TikTok reels.
Yes.
So, for example, one issue that we commonly face with content creators coming up to us, defamation claims, sort of like defames another person, or there's also instances of artists saying, like, we think that this person who doesn't like me, or who's like my direct competitor, is creating fake accounts to make all these negative comments and stuff like that. Do you hear of these stories?
I haven't experienced anything like that.
Lucky you.
I think it's more like a dig at their reputation and their ego, so that's why they feel very defensive over it.
Yeah. So I think that's the other area where sort of like guidelines and regulation comes into play. I think Singapore is very big on that. But like online bullying, cyberbullying, it's always a fine balance between freedom of speech and exciting content.
Yes.
Thanks, Lisa, for joining us. And will you be starting your own podcast soon?
Ooh, I would actually love to start my own podcast.
Yeah, and what would that be?
I would probably speak about dating.
Dating.
Yeah.
I look forward to your podcast when it comes out.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rachel. It was fun.
Bye bye.